At the time of this story I was 20 years old. I am now 27, and I should mention that I am a woman. I worked part-time in the cosmetics department of a drugstore, mostly in the evenings as a student, and I was never afraid to be there at night. It wasn't a bad neighborhood at all, and the store always had at least 4 people working at the same time. However, no matter what neighborhood we were in, idiots will be idiots, and the theft rate at our store was at an all-time high, and it was usually in the evenings. This company was a pleasure to work for, and they genuinely cared about our safety. And of course, about the merchandise that was going missing. So they hired a security company to guard the store in the evenings, mostly the cosmetics department. It should also be noted that although there were other employees in the store, the cosmetics department is quite secluded and only one employee worked there at a time. So the company of a security guard was very welcome to pass the time on a long, quiet night. I worked evenings, weekends, another girl would fill in for me in the evenings, and for the most part it was the same schedule every week. We had several different security guards come into our store, but sometimes it was just one man. I think about 25 years old, unattractive and very friendly. Let's call him Mike. Mike would come in his uniform and stand at our counter, thus scaring away any potential thieves. Quite often we would chat and pass the time over idle conversation. I am very talkative, practically an open book and sometimes too candid with personal information. I began to notice that it was always just Mike on duty during my shifts and asked him about it. To which he replied, "Yeah, you're only with me now. Everyone else has other vacancies." It was entirely possible, but I didn't give it much thought. Until one of my weekend evenings when I went into the store to buy something and saw another security guard working there with one of the other evening workers. Let's call her Sarah. I said hello to Sarah and the other security guard and then said, "Oh, it must be Mike's day off." To which the other guard replied, "Mike only works Sunday through Wednesday." This caused a small lump in my throat. That was my exact schedule. Must be a coincidence, right? Well, 20-year-old naively thought so, along with my wife. I went along without worrying about anything. What followed was a series of small, creepy encounters with Mike as I ran into him at a movie theater in my town. When I knew from previous conversations that he lived in a town 20 minutes away that had its own movie theater with the same sessions. He showed up at my work the day I took an extra shift, in uniform, stating that he was on his lunch break and that he now gets his prescriptions at my store instead of the one near his house because of better service. I asked the pharmacy technician if he had a prescription, and he said he did not. I still get goosebumps after that, and that's when I started treating this guy not too friendly. I also want to make it clear that in my conversations with Mike, I mentioned my awesome boyfriend multiple times. There was no way he could think that I might be single or interested in him. After the vacation I spent with his friends, he went back to work at the pharmacy on the same shifts as me, and I remained neutral towards them, continuing to make small talk to pass the time. He asked if I wanted to see the pictures he took while on vacation. It was a road trip, so he had a bunch of landscape shots. I said yes and took his phone from him. He said, "Just scroll through all the pictures to the left." So I scroll one extra time and see a picture of a dick. Of course I jump up, stutter a little, and say, "Oops, I think I went a little overboard." And then I hand the phone back to him, thinking it's a total accident, and he obviously sent it to his girlfriend or something. Except he's not the least bit embarrassed. He replies, "I was hoping you'd see that," and grins in a creepy way I've never seen. I'm getting goosebumps again as I write this. I was suddenly very busy, and I didn't have time to chat that evening. The next morning I decided to call the company he worked for and explain to them that I thought he might have a crush on me and I felt a little awkward. I told them I didn't want to make a scene and hoped they would just change his location or at least his schedule. I can be overly compassionate sometimes and don't want him to get in trouble, and I was worried. Maybe he thought I would like a picture of him with his dick for some reason, and that was my mistake. Like I said, I can be too open sometimes, and maybe he got it wrong. I was thrilled when I walked into the store the next night, and there was another security guard there. I was very thankful that the supervisor had listened to my concerns. However, as I and the rest of the store closing crew were approaching for the evening, we heard our car engine start. Just as we were leaving the store. When I looked to see where the sound was coming from, it was in the corner of the mall parking lot, completely empty and dark, and my stomach tied a knot when I realized it was the same car Mike had driven. Although I couldn't make out the exact color of the car, I was sure it was the same car. I tried my best to convince myself it was just someone else with the same car. Besides, I was closing up for the night. The car pulled out of the parking lot and I felt much better. As I walked to my car, I noticed a note under the windshield wiper blade. It said, "I am so sad that my location has changed. We will try to get back to your store as soon as I can. In the meantime, let's meet up." And then he left his phone number. At this point I'm practically sick with nerves. I jump in my car and drive out of there. The next day, I called my boss again. This time I told him the whole story and told him to tell him that I was not interested in him leaving me alone. I also told the store manager, who turned out to be a pretty great guy, who replied, "Oh hell no," and also called the supervisor, requesting that Mike be advised to never come onto our store property again. I didn't see or hear from Mike for several weeks after I decided I was in the clear. At that point, I hadn't said anything to my boyfriend about it yet. It was a fairly new relationship and I didn't want him to be shocked by it. A few weeks passed, and I was barely thinking about Mike and his persistent advances when a rainy evening came and I was at work preparing a new fall collection. When riding in the dark, it's pretty hard to see the store parking lot. In fact, all you can see in the windows is a reflection of yourself in the store. I was standing at the window, bent over, stacking some things on the bottom shelf, when a car honked outside the window. Of course I looked up to see what was going on, and over my shoulder in the reflection of the store I saw Mike standing behind me, just standing there watching. I think I jumped through the window and probably peed a little. I tried not to give the appearance of seeing him, though I'm sure he knew what I saw. I ran to the other end of the store where the very manager I told the story to was working. When I told the manager, he ran back to the cosmetics department. But Mike was no longer there. Later we watched the whole thing on camera. That evening, my manager called Mike's very angry supervisor again, who told us that Mike had quit the week before after being told to stay away from our store. You might wonder why no one called the police, but honestly, it just didn't seem dangerous enough. No one was hurt. It was just creepy. That was until I finally told my boyfriend and parents about it, and stopped driving myself to work. I developed a fear of walking to my car alone at night. So either my boyfriend or my mom or dad would drop me off and pick me up from work. Except that on this particular night, my parents were out of town and my boyfriend had things to do. On this particular Sunday night. So I drove myself. After closing time, I said my CO was catering to my coworkers and walked to my car at the end of the parking lot. There is a river at the end of the parking lot, and there are benches with zero lighting over the river. At night, the only light is the one that shines from the middle of the parking lot. So I'm walking to my car and I can't see anything. And then I hear someone's voice. I immediately recognize Mike's voice. He's saying something like, "Why did you do this to me? Why did you make me believe you needed me? We had so much fun together." Luckily, the pharmacy I took with me that night was not yet in his car. And he was just taking the trash outside the building to the dumpster. I yelled out, "Jim, hold on a second," and rushed to his car, where I probably didn't say it too loudly. "Call 911. The police arrived and combed the neighborhood looking for Mike, who disappeared without a trace. I never saw him again, and I hope I never will. A couple months ago I was visiting my hometown friends, just a bachelorette party at Selena and Carrie's apartment, listening to dubstep, gossiping, and enjoying a good old-fashioned rotation of 3-bang. Back to the beginning of the day. I'm driving with my friend Blanca to grab a bite to eat around the corner from Essence's place when she notices a man waiting at the crosswalk on the corner. He's wearing a red pullover, dark jeans, unkempt facial hair, and generally dirty looking. He appeared to be young, college age. Devon B. continues, "Oh my god, that's an SNC stalker. Why is this the first I'm hearing about this?" "Well, we knew you'd try to shoot that dude's balls off and that you'd be worried about them," she says. "You're damn right I am that friend. I have both my parents are federal agents. I try to stay on top of everything and I know what to do in different situations. So to say I'll be sitting on the roof like a sniper waiting for him is accurate." I meet the stalker's gaze as I round the corner and look at him in my rearview mirrors. And I've never been lucky enough to pay attention yet. We head back to the apartment where Selena and Kara are telling me about their stalker. As soon as I brought it up, I already knew exactly what was going on. Briefly, they told me that they'd seen him on the campus nearby, a few times at the library, outside their sorority house, and even standing outside their apartment when they came home from the movies early in the morning. Yes, I'd say he stalked them. He showed up at these locations several times. We continued to chat, and it's about 6 o'clock in the evening and the sun is setting. Their apartment has one mediocre white door. You can't see a damn thing through the peephole. Someone knocks on the door. I look up to make sure it's locked. And we're okay. I look around, all the girls are in the living room. I say, "Hey, don't answer it, everyone is here." Always hesitate to open the door. We weren't expecting anyone, and no one was supposed to be in there. I go to the people and then turn to the girls in the living room and say, "Looks like a dude. I can't tell. It looks like it could be too." I go back to my seat because, like I said, the whole gang is in. "Selena, I love you. But God, you could have ended our lives with your next act." She opens the door, not wide, not slightly, but the whole fucking length of it. We're all sitting within sight of guess who? A stalker in a red pullover. She looks him in the eye and says, "You love me, don't you?" She reaches up to slam the door shut, and I can see him start to hesitate. Thankfully, she closes it just in time, while Kara runs up to help secure the locks. I grab his arm and tell the girls to move away from the door to the kitchen walls. You never know what could be on the other side. Bullets or anything else could fly through at any moment. He slams his hands on the door and, giving up, walks away. Of course, the police are called, who come and ask for a description of him. All of my friends look at each other and don't know what to say except Red Sweatshirt, because they didn't actually look at him or try to get a description. I give the officer a description based on having seen him before. I knew this gut feeling of catching a distant glance in the car mirror was for a reason. I called my mom to walk us to our car parked across the street. She showed up practically with her gun at the ready. If she sees someone in the distance packing things like a sleeping bag, plastic bags, a jug of water, etc., she shines a flashlight at him, and he looks at her like a deer in the headlights. I've never seen anyone run so fast. She yells, "Yeah, right, you better run, you sick bastard." That was one of the best moments of the evening. Now, unfortunately, the story takes a sad turn. The girls tell me that the cops couldn't do anything since the stalker didn't really do anything. About 3 weeks after that, Selena texted me that she was at a party, and the stalker showed up at it. Just hanging around outside, and she apologized to her friends, but she needed to report it to the police because it was a dangerous situation. You can't play with shit like that. I believe the cops wrote up a report. But only after a female security guard at the Essence apartment complex was raped and assaulted. When she described the man, it was the same bastard who came to the door, and it all matched what I indicated in the report. My mom just went over his file. He was awaiting trial the other day with a female judge who doesn't play with shit like that. According to my mom, he's definitely staying in jail. In all my years in security, nothing compares to this in terms of some of the craziest things I've ever seen while on the job. In 2009, I was working full-time as a security guard for a fairly new business at the time. My job was to travel to several places that hired us to patrol after hours and check buildings and facilities to make sure they were locked and secure, or to provide security at local hospitals or local sporting events. I worked the graveyard shift and split my time between the local hospital and the patrol wing, and one of the places I regularly visited during that time was a self-service storage facility where you could rent space for any need for a weekly or monthly fee. I only visited this facility once or twice a night at certain times due to its somewhat secluded location and long distance. It is worth noting that no one was supposed to be there with me because the establishment closes at 10 p.m. The entire place is fenced in and only the owner and security have access through an automatic gate with a key card, and the outer perimeter is surrounded by a chain-link fence. The only exception is the western part of the company, which is not fenced, but borders a large wooded area. That evening I arrived at the site, and everything went as usual. I drove through the gate, parked nearby and armed with my trusty flashlight, walked around to check the passages to the office, and each individual unit to make sure they were all locked and secured. Everything looked good and I left. I returned a couple hours later, around 3:30 a.m., to do my last patrol of the night and check security. I walked down the last row of apartments, checking the locks. When I came to one of the unlocked rooms, number 27, I had gone in there before. It was locked and now it wasn't. I lifted the door and shined my flashlight inside. To my horror, I saw the slaughtered remains of a pig lying on a small wooden table in the center of the room. Choking on its odor, I shined the flashlight around and saw that there was nothing in the unit but the table and the dead hog. I noticed his insides scattered across the table. Blood had soaked the table and even gotten on the floor. I closed the cabinet almost as quickly as I had opened it, and hurriedly ran to my car to record what I had found and call 911. In doing so, I tried not to throw up. I was forwarded to the state police, and the dispatcher sent someone out, but it would take about 20 minutes for them to arrive. He told me to stay put and wait for them, which I did. I pulled away, parked my car in a spot where it couldn't be seen from the lot, and sat in it waiting, writing down what I found on my service laptop. And when I was done, I took a position from which I could see the device from afar and keep an eye on it. A little while later, I glanced at my phone and noticed that 15 minutes had passed. I sat and waited patiently for a police officer to arrive. When I saw someone walking out of the woods towards the row of cars where Unit 27 was, I noticed that he was carrying something with him, but I couldn't make out what it was. I sat and watched, and sure enough, the man opened the door and entered Unit 27 without closing it behind him. I was taught to intervene in a crime only verbally and never physically unless to defend myself. But because of the circumstances surrounding this particular case, I kept my distance and simply observed instead of engaging the man. I called the dispatcher back and gave him new information and a description of the man, Caucasian, thin to medium build, probably about 5-7 years old, wearing a black hooded sweatshirt and sweatpants. I watched the compartment closely, and eventually the man returned empty-handed and closed it behind him. I didn't see him leave and assumed he would come back again. I was still on the phone with the dispatcher and told him what I had seen. When he was out of sight, it took about 3 more minutes until I saw one of the police officers drive by. I kept talking to the dispatcher on the phone, and eventually I was told that they had found the man and had him in custody, and that another police officer would be arriving to talk to me so I could give them all the details. Anyway, they found a dead hog, a big knife and an empty bucket in the house. I found out that the man was only 15 years old, and he had access to the apartment because his parents had rented it out for a month, but never used it. He was going to be charged as a juvenile for trespassing and animal cruelty. I never heard anything about it after that, not even an article on our local news site. For a while afterward, I pondered what would have happened if he had arrived earlier and caught me inspecting the premises. Would he have attacked me? Surely he wouldn't have wanted anyone to know what he was doing and whether he was willing to kill innocent animals. Who's to say he wouldn't have killed a human? It happened to me when I was 19 years old, that is, in 2003. I was born and raised in a small town, and I was pretty sheltered all my childhood and adolescence. I was always warned about the dangers of strangers, but I never got into any unpleasant situations. That was until this happened. After high school, my best friend Jennifer moved to Los Angeles to attend the University of Southern California. I would say that at that point, I hadn't had the chance to be in a big city yet. So when I went to visit, it was a bit of a culture shock for me, especially things like the bus system and subway trains. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going without anyone else's help, and that stunned me. Luckily, I made it to her dorm. Okay, from the airport. I was there for about a week and we had a great time. Jennifer and I were always together, so getting around on public transportation was pretty easy and convenient. However, on the day I had to go back to the airport, she had to work. I didn't want her to worry and felt quite comfortable after riding the bus and subway all week. I said goodbye and managed to catch the train to the airport. The first leg of the trip to the airport went fine. I think I even had time to print out the directions. If you've never used the Los Angeles rail system, it goes through many small neighborhoods before getting to the more recognizable typical, "Here to the airport," signs. At some point I became convinced that I was going the wrong way, that I had no idea where I was, that I was going to miss my plane. I panicked. Anyway, I got off at the next stop and found a map of the transit lines, studying them as if they were written in Greek. That's when he approached me. Now that I think about it, I can't remember what he looked like. He was a big guy. He must have had about 100 pounds on me. Easy. But he was a security guard and he acted very friendly, asked if I needed help. It seemed like he genuinely wanted to help me. And when he asked me if I wanted a ride to the airport, which he said was very close by, I agreed, grateful that I could get where I was going. To me at the time, a security guard was as good as a police officer. I realized now that he wasn't, but I trusted him unconditionally because of his badge on his uniform. The first strange feeling I had was when he put my suitcase in the trunk, just put it in and slammed the trunk shut. Then I got into his car. It was dirty, with cigarette butts and trash lying everywhere. I remember I didn't know where to put my feet, so I had to put them on a pile of trash. And yet he had a picture of a little kid hanging in his rearview mirror. And I thought, okay, it's no big deal. He's a good man. We started driving, and I have absolutely no idea where he was going, but of course I wouldn't. After a while, however, it becomes clear that he is not going to the airport, or at least not the direct route. I try to remain calm and ask him questions. He claims he knows where he's going, that it's the fastest secret route, and things like that. We ended up in a fairly abandoned business district with trucking and other businesses that were either closed or empty. There wasn't a soul here, just deserted stretches of road. He starts circling the same streets, repeating places he's been before, and I get scared, but I don't want him to know how scared I am. This is where I feel like I'm waking up to what a bad place I'm in. He was wearing reflective sunglasses and smoking cigarette after cigarette after cigarette after I asked where we were and where we were going. He became completely silent, refusing to answer me. After a long silence, he started asking me about my underwear, how long I had been wearing it, what color it was, etc. At first I played along, trying to be cool. I must have made up the color. They said my boyfriend wouldn't like this conversation and things like that. I tried to calm him down, not wanting to make him angry. Then he said he would give me $100 just to see my underwear, and started reaching over to touch me. I just told him no, that I wasn't interested, but he didn't stop trying. At that moment, I fully realized the danger I was in. The only thing I wanted to do was get out of the car. I started thinking about how much it would hurt, since we were going so fast. I started telling him that if he wanted to just drop me off, I could have someone come get me. I remember trying to convince him that none of this was a big deal, that he could just leave me and that I would be fine. I just wanted to get out of the car. I kept trying to remind him that I had a plane to catch and that I was worried I wouldn't make it. It was hard to remember how long we had been driving and it felt like we were in the middle of nowhere. I leaned back in the passenger seat, thinking about the fact that I would have to jump if it got really bad. And so, after finally refusing to let him see, touch, or smell my underwear for money, he speeds up and drives out of the neighborhood we were driving through. He quickly drove me to the nearest train station and pulled into the parking lot. Needless to say, I've never been happier to see a train station. I quickly get out of his car and make sure people can see me. I remember thinking it was a big deal. He gets out of the car, takes my luggage out of the trunk and throws it on the ground, then calls me a bitch and drives away. I didn't tell this story to anyone for a long time because I felt really stupid for getting myself into this obviously dangerous situation. I still feel that way, but now I worry that I should have just told someone, that maybe he did it to someone else who was unlucky. A few months ago I moved into a large studio apartment. I'm a single with a 2-year-old daughter, and my sister and a few of her friends came over to my place about 3 weeks ago to hang out, drink beer, and play Cards Against Humanity. My studio has an enclosed patio, safe for opening the door. Since my baby was sleeping, I asked everyone to relax on the patio. We were having a great time, joking, talking and listening to music when a security guard walked onto my patio. "Hi, are we making too much noise? Did someone file a complaint?" I replied that I hadn't. "It's okay, I'm just making my rounds," he replied. He stayed for another minute and then went out into the night. We went about our business and didn't pay him any mind. He returned about 25 minutes later, just after most of the group had left. It was just my sister, her friend Cody, and me. He was a full-bodied white man in his late 40s or early 50s, wearing glasses. He came back onto my patio and struck up a conversation. We learned that he was a retired police officer who had to leave the force after having a heart attack on duty. He told me that he had to undergo bypass surgery, and after he recovered, he started working as a night guard. I felt sorry for him because of his medical history and sat and listened to him for quite a while. He must have sat for at least 30 minutes before my sister became uncomfortable and loudly announced that we were going to bed. He wished us a good night and left. As soon as we entered the house, my sister said she didn't like the way he was looking at me and she thought he liked me. I told her at first that she was overreacting and that he was just a lonely guy who had a long night shift ahead of him. A week and a half later, my sister came to visit again and we sat at my house and talked. My studio has a black mesh door and a wooden door. I closed the mesh and opened the wooden door to let air in. My sister is talking to me and I get the feeling that someone is looking at me. I look up. A guard is standing on the threshold of my patio and looking at me. I say hello and he jerks forward as if expecting an invitation or something. But I turn my attention back to my sister, and when I look back, he's gone. This week, Tuesday, I took a shower and threw on a robe. I did the dishes for about 25 minutes and poured a glass of wine. As I turned from the kitchen to sit on the couch, I stifled a scream. The guard was almost right up against my door and was looking right at me through a gap in the foot-long wooden door. I was so scared and shocked, but the first thing I did was make sure my robe wasn't exposing me. I ran over to the screen. "You scared me." No emotion or apology. "It's okay, I was just making my rounds." I got goosebumps crawling over my skin and I'm still shivering. "Okay, I'm going to bed." He's still near the door. At the very end of my patio. Then he turns and looks at my beach cruiser parked against the wall. "Oh, you have a bike? You should put it inside because someone might take it." "Yeah, good idea, I'll do that, thank you, I slam the door shut and lock it. I sit there with the wine and get my nerves in a twist. I was shocked, but I wasn't sure if he was really being a creep or just being a creep. He was looking for someone who showed interest. After discussing it with friends and my sister, I contacted the property manager. I was surprised at how quickly things escalated. They took my verbal report of the incident over the phone, and just today informed me that the guy was fired. The manager told me that if I saw him on the property again I should call the police. I am posting this story on behalf of my friend. She does not speak English and does not have a Reddit account. She wants to share a story that happened just a few weeks ago during her trip to prom. So, I've been looking forward to my graduation trip for a few years now. A whole 10 days alone, without my parents, with my friends and the guys from the travel company. I really had a great time. Admittedly, someone made me feel uncomfortable, the security guard. He was in charge of security in our wing of the hotel. The first time I met him, we chatted for a while. He was a nice enough guy. And I'm very outgoing and love talking to people. He asked me to guess his age and I guessed 45 and he was 30. We laughed and parted ways. The next day I went to a club with some friends and drank something that my stomach didn't like at all. I got back to the hotel early at night, around 6 or 7 in the morning. He saw that I wasn't feeling well and offered to escort me to my room. I accepted. He came with me, we said our goodbyes and separated again. Nothing weird. The next day he started acting weird. He asked my age. I told him I was 16, but I lied. I'm actually 18 and he didn't believe me. Then he asked a guy from a travel company I was friends with, and he said I was 18. The guard said, "Oh, so you're legal, nice." It made me a little creepy. That night he asked if I was a virgin, and I said it was none of his business. On the 4th day of work, I was waiting for the elevator with some friends and he walked up. He put his arm around my shoulders and started asking me questions like if I had a boyfriend, if I was going to be naughty on this trip, that we could do fun things and he wasn't going to kiss and tell. I felt very uncomfortable after that. He continued to shower me with kisses every time he saw me. He also put his hand to his heart and made faces. On the second to last day of my trip, I was going out with my friends. When I realized I forgot my phone, I told them to wait for me and I would get it from my room and come right back. There was no one in the part of the hotel where my room was because everyone was having fun. Literally no one, my friends and I were the last to leave and my friends were downstairs. When I got to that part of the hotel, I heard someone nearby. There was a security guard standing outside my room. He was standing there waiting. I was creeped out and felt very unsafe. I was completely alone, unless you counted him. What the hell was he doing there? I just forgot about my phone and went back downstairs to my friends. I didn't say anything to them. Just said I couldn't find my phone and went out to have fun. On the last day of my trip, the security guard was sad. He kept telling my friends that he never got to be with me and that he knew he could have shown me a really good time, that he waited for me for so long and I let him down. When the trip was over, I was upset of course, but also relieved because I wouldn't have to see that creepy guy anymore. I'm a 16-year-old girl from Colorado. This encounter happened today and I thought it was creepy enough to share. There has been a lot of talk lately about security guard and employees abusing their power. And I'm not saying that all security guard are horrible people. But this incident definitely got me thinking. I was in a retail store. A popular enough one to remain unnamed, with my mom, brother, and grandmother. I dropped them off in front of the store and left to park. When I walked into the store, they were nowhere to be found. I figured they were already walking around the store without me. When you walk into this store, there are usually 2 or 3 bell machines against the wall. And I know it's pretty cheesy. As I started to put my first $7 into the machine, I saw the reflection of a man approaching me through the game glass. I'm a pretty awkward person, so any unexpected interaction with a person makes me jump a little. I turned around to see the security guard. It was a young white male, probably in his early 20s. At this point I hadn't even entered the store yet, so I was confused as to why he was approaching me. I couldn't have stolen anything or done anything wrong. "You'll be the first to win," he said, grinning slightly and winking at me. I giggled nervously and turned back to the game. "What's your name?" he asked, taking a step closer in panic. I told him my real name. He was a cop, so why not? After a few minutes of awkward conversation and unwanted compliments about my appearance, I decided to leave the machine and go into the store. Have you ever had that feeling where you literally feel like I'm scanning you lengthwise? Yeah, that was me. I turned around to look at him as I left, and he looked absolutely furious. Good. Weird, I thought. But maybe it wasn't a big deal. Okay, here came the tipping point where things got creepy. I walked around the entire store at least 3 times every 3 to 5 minutes. I would turn around and see the same security guard, as if he was following me. Of course, it could have just been a coincidence. That was until the following happened. I caught him filming me on camera. I can even remember which aisle it happened in. I was looking for someone in gelatin for a special effects project. When I heard a woman scream, I turned around and saw a security guard with his phone pointed at me, and the woman had obviously caught him filming. As soon as he and I met eyes, he walked away. I looked at the woman who had called out to him, and she told me what she saw. She said he was filming me, and the video lasted about 10 minutes. I didn't know how to react to that as she walked past me to continue shopping. I didn't see him much after that. We soon left the store, but only after I played a couple more rounds on the claw machine. About an hour ago, I received a text message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I almost peed my pants. It was a video of me from earlier today. I blocked the number by showing it to my parents. We've reported the number, but so far nothing has come up. So, Mr. Security Guard, I hope I get lucky and never run into you again. When I first graduated from college in 2002, I worked the night shift at a Walgreens store located a mile from my parents' house. Since the job was a night job, we had a security guard. Usually the same person would come in several nights in a row. They were usually people who had other jobs or had been up for days because they worked so hard. Then we got a permanent security guard. He seemed okay at first, and my supervisor and I liked the fact that there were women in security. Working the night shift alone on Long Island wasn't very dangerous, but it was enough to have a third person if one of us had a break. Then the weirdness began. When I was restocking the shelves, I noticed that the security guard would just stare at me. One day I watched him out of the corner of my eye as I reloaded and restocked deodorant for at least 30 minutes. And the whole time he was looking at me. Didn't move, just stared. This behavior continued for a few days, but I didn't say anything about it because he wouldn't approach me. He would also disappear for an hour several times a night. He didn't really talk to me or my supervisor, which was odd because all the other guards were at least somewhat talkative at the beginning of their shifts. For some reason his boss came in and tried to find him. My boss said he might be in the back room. Apparently, the supervisor found him sleeping in the break room while his supervisor called the company. The security guard grabbed the phone and got into an altercation with them. He then began screaming and essentially went insane. The police were called, and 3 police officers grabbed the security guard and carried him out of the store. But in order for that to happen, my boss had to tell him to his face that he was no longer allowed in the store. He came back a few days later, specifically looking for me and my boss. Luckily, we were both free for the day. We got pagers after that, and the head of security would come in and chat with us for days after the old security guard stopped by. I felt much safer with the pagers. I never saw him again. But every time I was alone on the floor, I stood at any door in case he came back. Luckily, he never came back. My name is Crawford, and I'm 19 years old. My girlfriend Lauren and I decided to rent a place in the city. We ended up settling into an apartment, and there was a security guard named Phil. Phil acted cool at first. He greeted everyone when they entered the apartment, but then things took a turn for the worse and got a little nondescript. Lauren and I have an apartment at the very top with a view of the city, and a hot tub pool at the very top of the building. Lauren and I always go up there around 1 a.m. just to relax and talk and be alone. Phil comes out and says, "What are you guys doing up here so late?" Lauren picks up people's vibes easily, and she was really uncomfortable around him, and I told him we just wanted to see the city at night, and Phil said something that still gives me shivers. He said, "Would you guys have sex in front of me?" After that, Lauren says the funniest thing. She says, "You know, there's this site called Pornhub where you can go and watch people have sex. Could you please leave us alone?" Phil got mad at Lauren and walked back into the building. A couple days later, Lauren and I were celebrating our 1-year anniversary and went back to the apartment to have a little fun right in the middle of it all. Lauren screamed when she saw Phil in the bathroom doorway jerking off at what we were doing. I called the front desk and they called the police. The police soon arrived. We explained the whole situation to them, and thank goodness he lost his job. We still live in the same apartment, but it was probably the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me in my damn life. I'm happy we don't have to deal with it anymore.